it's a one-time adjustment that's necessary due to other scheduling that I have no control over. As if I have control over anything, but that's a different discussion. Oh, so say 11:50 to 12:30. 12:30. That's next week. Next week only. Hopefully we won't have to go through this adjustment again. On page 106, you'll find Parshas Chayei Sarah. Okay. A portion has a theme. There's obviously a theme in a portion. There's obviously a message that the author wants us to walk away with. Now, when it comes to a life, when you are writing a book about a person's life, so you focus on specific events. So if, let's say, you are writing a book about Sandy Koufax, who was a pitcher for the Dodgers, who would not.
Brooklyn Dodgers.
Brooklyn before 57, correct. Who would not pitch on Yom Kippur. So obviously your focus is going to be on his pitching and on his training, on what he would be doing on his vacations in December in South Florida. It wouldn't be so relevant if you're trying to understand baseball. Okay? And lahavdil, this is a book, the Torah is a book of ethics. It shares with us a lot about specific individuals like Abraham, Sarah, Yitzchak, Rivka, the Avot and the Imahot. But obviously we're not going to be be presented information that is simply irrelevant, like what Abraham Avinu ate for lunch, okay, or how he liked his scrambled eggs. Things like that are not going to be addressed. And so too, when it comes to interactions, who he interacted with, where he would get his sheep, right? We are not going to be told the names of the merchants unless there is significance, unless there is value. So as soon as you read about an interaction and a specific name is presented, you got to tune in. You got to try to figure out what is the message here. So that's piece of information number one. The significance of the name, the message. Piece of information number two, this week's portion, the bulk, deals with the mission, the journey that Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, is sent on to find a wife for Yitzchak. Yitzchak we have an image of him as the perfect Jew. The Jew that was from day one born into tradition, had his Brit Milah when he was 8 days old. He lives his full life because according to tradition, it seems to be that the Avot were supposed to live to 180. None of them reached that prime target. Yitzchak does. And another area where he is this quote-unquote ideal Jew is the fact that he never leaves Eretz Yisrael. Never left the land of Israel. Even today, in this day and age, there are those who are careful with it, that would not leave Israel due to the fact that that is the pure land, and outside of the land it's not. Now, Eliezer is sent on this mission to find a wife. He is looking for specific traits. The role this wife, Rivka, is going to fill, from the way the text presents her, is that she is here to fill the role of Avraham. In other words, even though the Torah tells us that when Yitzchak marries her, he has some comfort after the passing of his mother, nevertheless, if you look at the traits that Eliezer requests in his prayer, and if you look at how the text describes her, it seems to be you are seeing a little Abraham here. Okay, and we're going to point those few things out of why and how Abraham is what Avraham Avinu is, the personality we are looking in her. So with that introduction, we're going to read a little bit into the portion, and then we're going to try to understand the theme of the portion and the significance of a few things. So in the beginning of the Parsha, Sarah dies, that we know, 127 years old. The tradition links her passing to the events of the Akedah. Now, he is looking for a burial spot. Now this burial spot is going to be a significant purchase because it's not just going to be an average purchase of land, it's a sovereign purchase. It's a purchase that he wants to have control of that area. He wants to be sure that it is kept and that you will not have a developer wanting to purchase the area and build a mall or a tall a mosque or a condominium where the burial spot is. He wants to avoid it. So he wants to have complete legal right over it. So this is indeed a very significant purchase. And he is eyeing. Avraham Avinu has a specific cave in mind. Why does he have that cave? We're not told. But obviously, if he makes a request for that cave, he must know something about it that others don't. And the Midrashim fill in that he was aware of the fact that this is a cave that Adam HaRishon is buried there. For him, it is very, very meaningful. For others, it was insignificant. For Avraham Avinu, that his whole identity is a relationship to the Creator and inspired without doubt with Adam HaRishon. For him, this was important. For others, not. So he is targeting the cave, and he makes it very, very clear. And he notes, he tells them in verse 9, that I want you to link me. I want you to be sure that I am in contact with someone called Ephron. Now, Ephron is mentioned already in verse 8. But in verse 9, he spells out what he wants from Ephron. What does he want from Ephron? Verse 9, Ve'iten li es ma'aras ha'machpelah. I want the Machpelah cave. Why is it called a Machpelah cave? So we have traditions. Either, now obviously the root here is kaful, double. Either pairs are buried there, or it's perhaps a cave that has an upper level and a lower level. Whatever it is the name of the cave. And I am asking for the cave that happened to be on the edge of his field. Biktzeh sadeu. And Avraham is making it very clear that I want to purchase it for full value for the purpose of a burial site. That's what he's interested in. Now, Ephron communicates with him. And this is done in public, because this is, again, not a sale done just by an individual to another individual. This is a very significant sale because this is a sovereign purchase where you have to have others approving of it. So therefore, this is taking place in front of many. So turn to verse 11 on page 108. Now, he turns to Avraham Avinu. This is Ephron, the owner of the Machpelah cave. And he turns to Avraham Avinu and he says, listen, Lo Adoni Shmeini. No, listen. Heed me. Tune into me. And I'm willing to give you. Hasadeh natati lach. In other words, I'm giving you. You want a cave? I'm giving you a field and a cave. Hasadeh ve'hame'ara asher bo lechanesatia. You're getting both. He sounds like a very nice guy, this Ephron, because all he wants is a cave and he's willing to pay. And he says, no, I am giving it to you, and I'm going to give it to you, not just the cave itself, but even with the field. And this will be done in public. Le'enei bnei ami. I want sure that everyone knows about it, and you could go ahead and bury your dead. Now, Avraham Avinu rejects it. He rejects. And he says, I want it, but in verse 13, I already have set aside the money. Nosati kesef hasadeh. I already set aside the money. So just take it. The money is set aside. Please take the money. And there seems to be this beautiful argument that you find once in a while when you walk into a store. I don't know, I haven't seen it in the past few decades, where you say, no, it belongs to you, the money. In other words, no, that there's a fight between a store owner, perhaps in the olden days when it wasn't conglomerates, but when you actually had people who owned stores and it was a neighborhood and you interacted with people, right? Once in a while you hear stories. I heard a story, I visited someone who told me that his granddaughter is in Israel and she's joining the army, and she woke up late the morning she was supposed to appear at the military location. So she runs down, hops into a taxi, and shares with the taxi driver the story. This is I heard from Avram Feifel. He's in the hospital. He tells me that his granddaughter is late. She hops into the taxi. The taxi driver takes her to the location, wishes her hatzlacha and a mazel tov that she's joining the army today, and she says, how much is it? And he says, what are you, crazy? I'm going to charge you. You're going to defend the country. You think I'm going to charge you for the ride? Absolutely not. Right? A nice story. You hear that once in a while, you hear such stories, right? Of interactions where people are having an interest not just in the money, but in values. This is a person that's conveying to this young lady, who was 18, she was never going to forget it, that when she started her service for the Jewish state, the Jewish taxi driver is not going to charge her. Now that is magnificent. So this seems to be one of these magnificent stories, right, where no one wants to take the money. So Avraham Avinu makes it clear, I want to pay. So let's read verse 14 carefully. And this is Ephron responding. Ephron, on the surface, generous fellow on the surface, because he turns to Avraham Avinu and he says, listen, Adoni Shmeini, now listen to me, my master. I want to give it to you. And it's a land, Eretz Arba Me'od Shekel Kesef, a land of 400 silver shekels. Between you and me, Beini u'bencha mahi. What's for, in other words, it's a land that is worth, this is Ephron. Abraham, this is a land that is worth 400 silver shekel. What's the big deal for me to just give it to you as a gift? That's what he says. Now, Avraham Avinu understands what he is really saying. Vayishma Avraham el Ephron. He really understands. It's like the person, I've mentioned this in the past, that you ask them to pick something up at Shoppers Drug Mart. They come and they deliver it for you, and you ask them how much was it. They say, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. What is $16.38 between us? You know, what is it? You understand very well that what they are saying is please pay out, and you find some 3 pennies there to be sure that it reaches $16.38 because I want to be paid in full. This is Avraham Avinu understanding very well what Ephron is about. And Vayishma Avraham el Ephron, and he pays him, he buries her there. What is this Ephron personality? What is he really about? Now, the rabbis clarify a little bit more what Ephron is about. But first we want to go ahead and assess Rivka a little bit. You know the story. He's sent on a mission. It's interesting that the animals that are described several times in this long chapter are the camels, the gemalim. And we associate gemalim to acts of kindness. Gmilut chasadim. Gomel chesed, a person who performs acts of kindness. Why did the camels, which happen to not be a kosher animal, but why does the camel get this merit that for eternity they are linked to one who is performing acts of kindness? Gomel chesed. Why do the camels have that schus?
They're always smiling.
They're always smiling. Interesting. Maybe.
They're always spitting.
Now,
That's Paul. He's always smiling.
anyone else want to give an attempt something else maybe? Now.
How about they labor for a long time without requiring nourishment?
Okay. They're doing for others without nourishment. They take care of their needs earlier on in the journey, and they go for miles, doing for others. That is chesed. That's the answer. They are doing for others. They have their own needs taken care of, and they do for others. And by the way, we know very well that, not in all cases, but often the people who are able to do chesed, who are really able to live for others, are the ones that had childhoods, right, where there was comfort, where they were taken care of. A person develops in a healthy environment, you develop in a healthy environment, you are taken care of. And then you could live a life by doing chesed. You become a camel, right? You are caring, you're taken care of. You are there to take care of the needs of others. And we know very well that the needs of others are often emotional needs. You are taken care of, you could do for the sake of others. The ones that are, that the reality is that they have a need, don't excel in that field. Gmilut chasadim. Why does the gamal appear here? This is what this portion is all about. Chesed. Now, he prays to the Almighty, and he makes it very clear on page 110. If it's a young lady, that in the last, on verse 14, if I turn to her and say, Hatina kadech, go ahead and tilt your jug to give me a little bit of water. But her concern is not just for my welfare, but for the welfare of the animals. Then I know, on page 113, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have designated this young lady for the son of my master. Two key words here that describe Rivka's behavior. Two key words are, number one is that she goes, and she does it with Ritza, right? Let's look at verse 20. Number one, Vatimaher. She hurried. Number two, Vataratz. These are two words that describe enthusiasm. She's not just doing it, as they say, to be yaitza. You know the term, to be yaitza? You do something because you got to do it. But no, there's enthusiasm there. And if you look back to the portion that describes the essence of Avraham Avinu, which were the acts of kindness, if you look back to the beginning of last week's portion, where he is interacting with his guest, those two terms appear there as well. Vayaratz, he runs to them. Elabakar ratz Avraham, vayimaher la'asototo. So you see very well that the text wants to make it clear. What is the identity? What is the trait that we are seeking out? What is Avraham Avinu interested in? What is Eliezer eyeing here? A woman that is a symbol of chesed, and she does it with excitement and enthusiasm. This is what they are looking for. Okay, you want continuity for the people of Israel. It is very nice to have spirituality. And if you think about Yitzchak Avinu, your image of him will not be of one running around doing acts of kindness. He probably meditates a lot. He prays. He has the ability to overcome human weaknesses and develops into a very spiritual being. But that's not how you build a Jewish future. A Jewish future is built when there is a commitment to others. And if in the relationship in Avraham and Sarah, Avraham is able to fulfill that role, he doesn't see it in his son. He needs someone to balance it out. So what he is looking for, and what this portion is all about, it's a portion that's telling us the end of Avraham Avinu. That's what it seems to be about, that he's bearing his wife, and at the end of the parsha, he himself passes away. But what we are seeking is a future with chesed. That is what we are looking for. Now, with the understanding of the chesed element, we could go back and understand why this portion is introduced with Ephron and the significance of Ephron. You know that there is a basketball player. There's a basketball player. Now, I'm no expert, so don't ask me too many shilas, right? I already touched baseball today. But I'll mention his name is LeBron James. LeBron James is, from what I understand, the best. He's the greatest today. Today, he's not as good as Michael Jordan, but he is the greatest player today. Now, LeBron James was a player earlier in his career in his hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio. I have to be careful not to say anything negative about Cleveland, because my mother might watch this, and she's grew up there in Cleveland. So he's in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, Cleveland is a city that does not succeed in the realm of professional sports, right? I don't know if the Cleveland Indians ever won a World Series. I don't know these things. But they're not known for their hatzlocha. That's not the contribution they make. When it comes perhaps to gun violence, they are up there, and that's where they make their mark. But in other areas, not. Now, LeBron was like a god there. They had a statue of him in front of the arena. He was everything for the Clevelanders, but he knew very well that in Cleveland, he's not going to get himself his ring for winning the championship. So I don't know how long, this is about 10 years ago perhaps, he decides he's leaving Cleveland and he's going down to Miami. Miami had a better basketball team, and it was an Avelis. In other words, the city of Cleveland was, Sak va'efer, Yutzal Arabim. It was a public morning. And I remember hearing on the radio that LeBron had to make a choice. Is his interest a ring or being admired and loved by his fans? You can't get both. In other words, in Miami, you come there, he's going to be someone that they utilize him to win a game, but nothing more. In Cleveland, if you would stay in Cleveland, he's not going to get his ring. I mean, he's not going to win a championship. But what he is going to get is love, and he has to make his choice. What's more important to him? This is that way it's presented. Often in life, right, we have to make our choices based on priorities. What is important for us, right? Money is important for you, right? There are those that money is very, very important. At times, the person who is going to put all this effort and energy and concern into money is going to pay a price because family members are not going to enjoy him because he's too selfish. Children are not going to have a relationship with him because he's always at work. You make your choices. That is what's important for you. There are those that family is very important, and at times you're going to have to struggle financially as a result. There are choices we have to make. Right? Some people have them on one level, others on a different level. We make choices in life. There are those who want it all. There are those who want it all. And the rabbis tell us that Ephron is an individual that desires two things: money, but he also desires what they call kavod, honor. In other words, for him to go ahead and have a reputation that the most recognized and admired individual in Israel, Avraham Avinu, because at that point, Avraham Avinu is respected. Nesi Elokim ata betochenu, which indicates that what the Almighty promised him, that in this new land, you're going to be respected and you're going to have an impact on others, it is actually taking place. For Ephron to stand up there and say to Avraham Avinu, you know what? You don't have to pay me. You know, he was, without a doubt, the news coverage the next day, the headlines, Ephron, a real hero. You know, CNN has their heroes. Ephron would have been, without a doubt, a hero. That he was willing to lose hundreds of silver shekel just to honor Avraham Avinu. Kavod, without a doubt. Ephron wanted that. But at the same time, what did he want as well? He wanted the money. He wanted everything. He wanted the honor and he wanted the money. And he's a smart guy, for the record. Because, number one, what does he do? The cave did not have a value of 400 shekel. The cave did not. So what does he do? You know that sometimes they have on TV that you buy, they make up these new tchotchke, that if you have that, everything, cutting vegetables will just suddenly be easier for eternity. And it is an amazing tchotchke, and it comes not with one blade, but 17 different blades. And if you call in within the next 30 minutes, we're not going to give you one. We're going to give you two of these tchotchkes that are made in China for 15 cents for $39.99. In other words, they take something that is worthless, add to it, make it look big, and then they could sell it for $40 plus shipping and taxes, right? That's what they could do. The first one to come up with this idea, Ephron. Ephron's brilliant. Avraham Avinu needs a cave. Okay? He needs a cave. The cave, what was it worth? Perhaps 100 silver shekel. So Ephron says, no, they go together. It's a gift. It's a gift and they go together. Cave and field, look in the text. That's exactly what he does. Avraham Avinu says, Ma'arata machpelah. And Ephron responds, no. Hasadeh, you could have the field as well. They go together. You can't separate the two. It's a gift. It's a gift. It's a gift that's worth 400 silver shekel. It's a gift, but they go together. Avraham Avinu gets it. He gets it. Ephron walks away with a tremendous reputation, by the way. There's no question. He was willing to give it for free. Now, Avraham Avinu understands very well he doesn't want to give it for free. Avraham Avinu pays because he's the ethical person that understands that if deep down the seller wants the money, Avraham Avinu is going to give the money. Ephron wants it all, and the rabbis call him a Ra'ain. There are people who have good eyes. When they see things by others, they are happy that others have it. Right? They realize that their existence here is one where they can make a contribution to the world. Tov Ayin, he's a blessing. Hu Yivarach, we are told. Ephron is Mr. Ra'ain. And the rabbis present the fact that if you look at the spelling of Ephron's name, At the end of the story, or when Avraham, on page 108, verse 16. Up until that point, Ephron is spelled with 5 letters. Ain, Pei, Resh, Vav, Nun. Suddenly, when he is getting the money, in verse 16, when he is getting the money, Vaishkol Avraham le'Ephron, no Vav. Okay? So if you look at the Rashi, Rashi spells it out. That Lefi Shamar Harbe, he said, he sounded very generous. Va'afilu me'at lo hasa, but he did not do even a little. Because he took the most significant, good coins, the best of coins. And remember, if you look at the word Ephron, and you put together the numerical value of Ephron, it comes to 400. When we label someone a 400, Ain, by the way, is 70, Pei is 80, Resh is 200, Nun, 50. Okay? Ephron is 400. 400 is the person who wants the max. And just as when it comes to numerical values, the last letter in the alphabet is the Taf, the numerical value of the Taf is 400. This guy is a 400. I don't know if is there a Forbes 400 list? So a Forbes 400 will be the people who want it all. Right? They want to be sure that they have it all because they are here. Their existence in this world is for their own comfort and their own sake. And by the way, we find often that the number 400 makes its appearance when we want to make reference to this idea of people who had a ra'ain. You remember Yosef's brothers, how they interacted with him? They interacted with him because they saw only the negative in him. And as a result of their hatred towards Yosef, we land up in Egypt for 400 years, according to the text. When Esav comes attacking Yaakov, in Parshas Vaishlach with 400 men. And there's stories of Navala, Carmeli, there's a whole list of the 400 type of guy. So you label someone, he's a Mr. 400, he is Ephron, and he has a Ra'ain. Ra'ain, actually also, Resh is 200, Ain is 70, and another 70, 10, and 50 equals 400. Okay? Ra'ain, Ephron equals Ra'ain equals 400. That is what he is all about. And this is an introduction to the portion to tell us that we are looking for the opposite of Ephron. We are looking for someone who brings kindness, concern for the welfare, who could run, who could do it with enthusiasm. That is what Rivka is all about. But now we have to look at the name Ephron in one other way. And that is, I've had a lot of discussions and analyzed often and discussed here with others as well, the concept of visiting cemeteries, visiting graves. This could be relevant to visiting a grave of a parent or making a trip to Europe. There are many graves there. When you make your tours there, they point out graves. There are graves. Sorry, this is a coffee break.
Thank you, Rabbi.
It's good for me, believe me. Visiting Kvarim. There are those, when they go to Israel, you ask the question, you're on your way to Israel, what are you going to be doing there? Okay, there are those visiting historical sites, relatives, the restaurants, the kotel, the list is long. There are those that visiting graves plays a significant role. That they go to pray by different rabbis, maybe in Miron or in Sfat, northern Israel. How do we view it? In other words, does it have a purpose? How should we approach it? So number one, there are those who believe, and this is more, you will find this philosophy in yeshivot, that it is considered problematic to pray to a person who is no longer here. Meaning, what they would tell you is it is okay to go to a grave. There is no question that if it's a righteous person, the terrain they lay in is sanctified. But what you should do is be mindful of the fact that it is a location where you could connect to God. So therefore, don't address the deceased, but rather speak to God. That's one school. That's a very, I would call it a Lithuanian yeshiva misnagid school. Then there are those, and this is not just modern thinkers, but it has its roots. I found roots already in hundreds of years, and in sources that are very old. The Sefer Chassidim, that he tells us straight out, and this is a book from 11th or 12th century, that you could address the souls. In other words, there is an element of the soul that still remains in the burial place, and you relate to them, and you could share things with them, and you could ask them to pray. There are those who give a green light for such behaviors. There's a custom by some that they actually invite, that before a wedding in the family, they go to the Beis Olam and they actually invite the soul to make its appearance. For some this is foreign, for some this is done. And both schools has its roots, different approaches that indeed do exist. It's interesting that in halachic literature, they talk about people who live outside of Israel and come to Israel for a period of time. And the question is, do they have to observe Yom Tov Sheni or not? You know the question? Everyone addresses and struggles with it. So I was going through some literature from about 300 years ago, and it mentions there that there are young students who were in Israel, and they came for the ziyarah. And I look at that word, and I know very well this word is not from the Talmud. It's not from Jewish sources. What on earth is the ziyarah? That students would come to Eretz Yisrael from Turkey and from other places for a ziyarah. So I looked it up, and ziyarah comes from a practice followed by the Muslims that they visit graves. It's called a ziyarah. And it seems to be that Jews who lived in those countries adopted the term that we're going to Eretz Yisrael for kvarim hopping, visiting one grave to another, and it's a ziyarah. So this is something that was done by many for many, many years. Now, there are times that in Israel, some locations are most probably not the actual burial sites. There are some question marks. In other words, there are those that we know very well, we have traditions, and there are those where there are question marks. For example, there was in the middle of the 19th century, there's a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yosef Schwartz. Rabbi Schwartz lives in Yerushalayim in the 1840s. Yerushalayim 1840s is very, very different than it's just beginning its development. Meaning, if you want to point to a year that really shifts Yerushalayim from a small shtetl in essence, to the city that it is today, you have to go to January 1837. What's happening in January 1837? Up until January 1837, if I'm a European Jew, and I decide that I'm going to Eretz Yisrael, which there were always individuals, we didn't show up only towards the end, we have been there for many, many years, and many, many good Jews have made their way to Eretz Yisrael. Prior to 1837, if I make my way to Eretz Yisrael, by most Europeans, the targeted location would be northern Eretz Yisrael, Tzfat, before 1837. Why? It was a developing city. People were becoming mystics. And for the mystics, Miron is very important. Unfortunately, in January 1837, there's a massive earthquake in Tzfat. You could still see when you do visit Tzfat, your tour guide will point to a few of the kvarim that are in an odd direction, and he will tell you that this is due to the earthquake that occurs. Hundreds, unfortunately, passed away, if not thousands. And then there's a shift towards Yerushalayim. There were even those rabbis who believe that this is a sign for us that we should start boosting Yerushalayim. And Yerushalayim is having its boost, starting in 1838, that by 1865, there's no room left in the city. And Montefiore has to go ahead and build a neighbor in Mishkanot Shamanim outside of the city. And in the first few years, people who had properties outside of the city would go there during the day, but at night they were afraid. So they would go back in town, inside the whole city, to be in the gated, in the walled city. We know that. Now, Rabbi Yosef Schwartz, has a fascination, an interest, and a love of Eretz Yisrael. And he's doing research on every city, on every river, and he's trying to locate all biblical names and all biblical sources that identify locations in Eretz Yisrael, he wants to identify them with maps, and he, of course, was assisted with names that the Arabs use of specific locations, and he wrote a few books about Eretz Yisrael. Now, these are fascinating works. Yosef Schwartz is well known in many circles. He actually was visiting the United States in 1850 and 1851. He actually testified at a trial in Philadelphia. There was a person by the name of Warder Crescent who converted to Judaism, and we talked about him here. He converted to Judaism in 1848. When he comes back to collect his property, to make his way back to Eretz Yisrael, his Gentile family wanted everything taken from him because they paskin that he is crazy. Obviously, if you convert to Judaism, you are crazy. And there was a trial, and there are records. There's some fascinating stories about Warder Crescent's trial. One of the individuals who testified in court is Yosef Schwartz, who knew him. So this is just an interesting individual. Yosef Schwartz's expertise led him to the following conclusion that you should know. On Har HaZitim, there is a location that many Jews at that time were going for prayers. And they claim that it is the burial site of Huldah HaNeviah, who is mentioned in Tanakh. Yosef Schwartz, doing his research, believed that it is impossible, that it's not the location of the burial. And therefore, he believed that this was just some kind of Muslim invention that the Jews adapted. Okay, so point is, there has always been a question about burial, about prayers, what we do. Let me tell you what I think is the real way to go forward and approach burial sites. And that is when I go to a grave. I want to walk away with a message. We are told in Kahelet, Tov lalechet el bet, it's better to go to the house of a mourner than to go to Bet HaMishtet. Meaning, for humans, you think it's much more fun to go to a wedding than going to be Menachem Avil. But if you want to know what's really good for you as a human being, it is better to go ahead and give comfort. It is better to go somewhere where you get a reminder what your existence is about. When I go to a cemetery, the goal should be that I learn a message about life. That, guess what? We're not here forever. And due to the fact that we're not here forever, we have a responsibility while we are alive. What is our responsibility? To do for others. Our responsibility is to teach our values, to touch other souls. We know that. And if we are mindful of it, if I am mindful of it when I walk into a cemetery and visit a grave of a loved one, I am without a doubt doing something very good for them. Okay? When we talk about Yesheneh Afar, right? We turn to the Almighty to remember the ones who are buried in dust. In Judaism, a reference to dust is not to depress us. It is to inspire us to maximize and do the right things while we are here. That is what it is all about. When we look at Afar, right, the appropriate approach should be to remember, let's do kindness. And by the way, there are many references in our sources that when a person visits a cemetery, either before or after, they give tzedakah. Why specifically then? It is the idea that we remember we are here we're not going to be here forever. Right? I don't know how many of us are going to be around in 70 years from now. I don't know. But what I do know is that the actions we do, if we have an impact on others, we touch others, right? We do good, that will be around. And what inspires us? The visit to Afar. Now, unfortunately, there are those that when they come in contact with the concept of dust, of the end of our existence, they say, you know what? I got a party. I'm not going to be here. You only live once. You've heard that term? It's one that's used often by some. You only live once, so you might as well, right, have a good time. Dust, Afar, could be very destructive. The byproduct, the result could be a person who is mindful of Afar could become a Ra'ain. You could become an Ephron. If you let Afar have that negative impact on you. For us Jews, afar is a reminder to do kindness. And by the way, the source, the first reference we have to someone visiting a grave and being inspired as a result to do the right thing, the first reference is actually Kalev ben Yefuneh. Remember the spies. They go to the land of Israel, right? Kalev, one of them. He is one of the strong ones who was able to come back and convey a positive message. So we are told in the text of the Torah, it says that he came to Hebron. And the rabbis tell us that it's not all of the spies, but rather only Kalev ben Yefuneh comes to Hebron. Why did he come? Leishtatech al kivrei avot. He made a visit to the Ma'arat HaMachpelah. This is the source. That location where the matriarchs and patriarchs are, that's where he got inspired that afar should not turn you into Ephron. It should not make you into a Ra'ain. Afar should encourage you to do good while you are alive, to do acts of kindness. And that is what this portion is all about. Avraham Avinu is leaving this world, right? His kindness is no longer going to be here. Where is there continuity? The continuity is Rivka. Rivka is that symbol of enthusiasm and what we are about, what Judaism is about. Concern for humanity and, of course, concern of acts of chesed, milut chasadim. It is all here. And we are not going to be corrupted by the afar. We're not going to turn into Ephrons. We're not going to turn into selfish people because we feel, hey, I'm only here for X amount of years. I might as well do whatever I can to enjoy myself. But rather, the approach is going to be that I get inspired. So when you visit a cemetery, right, what I would recommend, if you do make those rounds in Israel, number one, don't turn it into something pagan. Meaning to believe that you go pray at a cemetery and then you're a holy Jew and you can do whatever you want. That is very problematic. The best way to visit Kever, anyone you ever go, if you're in Europe, or if you're in Israel, or if you go Rosh Hashanah to Uman, what I would recommend is read up on the individual. Learn about their life. Learn about their values. Learn about their kindness. Learn about their commitment to the people of Israel and how they weren't selfish. And learn from it and walk away to be inspired that your life is not going to be an Ephron life, but it's going to be a Rivka life. And that's what the cemetery is really there for. And that's why in our sources it relates to tzedakah. Turn around and be inspired. Do good. It is very dangerous when you could take something Jewish that has great significance and turn it into an avodah zarah. Rambam warns us, there were people that they would take their mezuzah and they believed that the mezuzah protects the house. So therefore they would add names of angels, of protective celestial angels, into the mezuzah itself, believing that that's going to protect them even more. So the Maimonides writes that people who do that, basically, in his words, have no portion in the world to come. They are destroying Judaism. Because you are taking a mitzvah, and what are you doing with it? You are turning around and making it something like, like a charm, like a good luck charm. That's what not Judaism. Judaism is not about that. Judaism is that you take ideas and that when you walk into a home, you remember that there's a God and it is going to inspire you to act in a specific way. Kvarim, unfortunately, the idea of visiting graves has that same danger. That you have people, I remember seeing interviews of a person going to Tveria and he says, we first stopped by Rabbi Meir Balanes and then we go have the fun. And the fun that he was referring to was a fun that I don't think Rabbi Meir Balanes would actually do the same things. So you have to be sure that you take the message. And I think this is what the theme of the portion is. Don't be an Ephron. Don't be a Ra'ain. Yishenei Afar. We all struggle with the pain, the reality of existence, and the pain of loss. But we could do things that are eternal. And that is what we learn from Rivka. And we read this portion. We've been reading it for 3,500 years. We get inspired every week by a young girl that is committed to the stranger. And that's hopefully the message we take as good Jews. Thank you for listening and have a good day.